With me now, Julian Kirby, who's plastics campaigner for Friends of the Earth. Goes without saying, this is something you welcome.
Good afternoon. Well, we welcome the sentiment of this for sure, and it's
well,
credit.
It's more than sentiment, is it? It is a commitment.
Well, it's a voluntary agreement, and it's a voluntary agreement with government and business coming together and saying, well, let's see if we can achieve this by this point. And that's credit to the Great British public for really pushing the agenda, very concerned after Blue Planet and even before Blue Planet. But people who've been worried about excess packaging will have seen these sorts of voluntary agreements coming over the years, and yet packaging has still been increasing over the years. So that's why we're saying at Friends of the Earth we really need government action.
It's what's the alternative to the packaging is clearly at the heart of this. And as you say, the consumer seems to be on the side of the planet on this. And so are we talking about package-free aisles in supermarkets? Is that the way forward here?
Well, the way forward is to prevent the use of plastic in the first place as far as possible. And in the short term, we need to be ensuring we have only recyclable and reusable content on packaging or products put on the market. It's good that this Plastics Pact says that will be achieved by 2025, but that's arguably a bit late. It's also saying that by 2025, all packaging put on the market must contain at least 30% recycled content. Well, there are companies today that are already using 100% recycled content and saying in some of their products and saying that by 2020 they'll be completely using recycled content. And so to say that by 2025 less than a third of the packaging you use will come from recycled plastic is actually quite weak.
What can be done in the meantime on an everyday basis to try and we can't prevent the problem's already there, but at least to mitigate it? I mean, beach combing, is that the answer? What do we do?
So actually picking up plastic pollution, which is what it is, rather than litter, it's pollution caused by the companies that make and market this stuff, from beaches is a good way of trying to reduce the extent of the problem in the sea, because the sea throws this stuff up onto the beach. That's an opportunity for us to remove it. But we really have to look at getting plastic out of the system as far as possible. Recycling can't be the answer in the long run. We have to phase out all but the most essential plastics, actually, if we're going to end plastic pollution.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Blue Planet too. The problem's already there. So what do we do about those bags that are a mile under the sea and causing, we assume, dreadful havoc for generations to come unless something's done?
Well, I think the bags that are a mile under the sea, we're just going to have to cross our fingers and hope for now that they're not doing damage and harm.
That's all we can do, is it?
And in the short, well, what we have to do is stop making the problem worse. Stuff that's at the bottom of the sea, that's very hard to get to. But so much plastic pollution is still getting into the sea, and it's not just from packaging and single-use plastics. A lot of it is coming from things like cosmetics, coming from car tyres, maybe up to a fifth is coming from vehicle tyre dust.
Run that, how does that work? How does that
Well, we're all familiar with our tyre being a bit worn. Well, why is it worn? It's because the plastic that is the rubber, what we call rubber of the tyre, has been worn off. Now, where's it gone? It's gone into the drains, it's gone into the air, it's ended up in the sea. A tenth of marine plastic pollution is estimated to come from our clothes. That plastic fleece jacket many of us wear, we don't realise it's plastic, but that's shedding microfibres. They go down the drains, they go into the sewage system, and actually water companies are horrified at the fact that they know that they're spreading this plastic on fields because they spread sewage sludge on fields. Potentially it's getting back into the food chain. So this is a very sort of broad cross-sectoral issue, which is why we need government action across the board to look at it.
As Friends of the Earth, is there one particular aspect of how we deal with our waste that horrifies you most?
What's of growing horror is the idea that that what we used to think was recycling of plastic is actually downcycling of plastic. So
explain the difference.
What that means is that where a plastic bottle is recycled back into a plastic bottle, and that's a good thing. Of course, even better is if it's reused as a bottle and that it wasn't plastic in the first place. Downcycling is where the quality of the plastic that's been recycled isn't good enough to make it into another plastic bottle. So it's made instead into a fleece jacket, or it's made into a cycle path, plastic road covering, that kind of thing. Now, what's of growing horror about that is that those fleece jackets, as I mentioned just now, or the cycle path, the road surfaces, are busy shedding tiny particles of plastic into the environment. And actually those tiny plastic particles are potentially the most dangerous, because what they can do when they get into seawater is they absorb toxins in the surrounding water. They can be up to 1 million times more toxic than the surrounding seawater, because minute quantities of things that were banned years ago, like the agricultural pesticide DDT, is still there. They get hoovered up by the plastic particles. They then get eaten by small fish, who get eaten by larger fish and get concentrated up the food chain.
One final question, because there isn't anybody watching, I suspect, who doesn't understand that something needs to be done. Nobody thinks this is a good thing.
Sure.
But is the answer in the long run somewhere in science? It's how you break this down into something that isn't harmful.
Then there needs to be innovation for sure to look at some of the tricky areas of getting rid of problematic plastic, like car tyres that I just mentioned.
I mean,
how
we saw recently about some enzyme that does tackle plastics.
So that was an announcement we heard last week. Really, really interesting that this enzyme, a protein, can break down complex plastics into the much simpler molecular form. Sorry, a tongue twister there. But that's only going to help with plastic that we've already recovered. So it can't help with plastic that's blowing through the fields, that's in the sea already. And at the moment, the best recycling and best recovery for recycling in the world is across Europe, where only 1/3 of plastic is recycled. So the rest of it has been burnt, it's going to landfill, or it's escaping into the environment. And that enzyme can't help with any of that 2/3 of plastic.
Julian, it's very good of you to come in. Julian Kirby, Plastics Campaigner for Friends of the Earth. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.